At my son's wedding, he seated me at a table in the back corner with people I had never met. My own son. I smiled and said nothing. He had no idea that I had written the check for the entire reception. Good day, dear listeners. I'm Hannah, and I'm glad you found your way here. Please like this video and stay with me until the very end, and let me know what city you're listening from. It means more than you know to hear how far these stories travel. I used to think that being a good mother meant never saying no. For 34 years, I built my life around that belief. My late husband, Frank, and I were careful people. He drove a delivery truck for most of his career. I worked as a school librarian. We clipped coupons. We bought used cars. We put money away every single month, even when it was only $40, because Frank always said, the river gets to the ocean one drop at a time. When Frank passed 4 years ago, after a short battle with pancreatic cancer, he left behind a paid-off house in Columbus, Ohio, a modest investment account, and a retirement fund that, together, added up to just over $600,000. Not a fortune by anyone's standards, but enough, more than enough for a 67-year-old woman living alone. My son Daniel was 41. He worked in commercial real estate in Charlotte, North Carolina. His wife, Melissa, had grown up wealthy and had never quite adjusted to a life that was merely comfortable. They had 2 children, my grandchildren Chloe, who was 8, and a boy named Ryan, who had just turned 6. I adored those children the way only a grandmother can. They were the reason I always answered when Daniel called, no matter what came next. And something always came next. It started the way these things always do: small, reasonable, easy to say yes to. Mom, we're a little short this month. Could you float us $2,000? Mom, Chloe's school requires a laptop, and they're expensive. Mom, the car needs new brakes, and we just don't have it right now. I said yes each time. Of course I did. Frank and I had worked for 30 years, so that our son would never have to struggle the way we did. That was the whole point. But 2,000 became 5,000. 5,000 became 20. And every time I transferred the money, Daniel would say, "We'll get it back to you as soon as the Henderson deal closes." The Henderson deal never closed. Or if it did, something else had already swallowed the money before it could reach me. In 3 years, I had given my son $162,000. I did not know that number yet. I would learn it later, in the worst possible way. Daniel called me in February to tell me that he and Melissa had set a date. They were renewing their vows for their 10th wedding anniversary. A real celebration this time, he said. Not just a dinner. They wanted a proper party, a venue, a caterer, a DJ, flowers, the whole thing. They had found a beautiful spot outside Charlotte, a converted barn on a horse property, and they wanted to book it for June. I was overjoyed. Of course I was. A family celebration. A chance to see Chloe and Ryan. A reason to get on a plane and feel like I belonged somewhere again. Then Daniel mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the venue required a minimum spend of $28,000 for a Saturday evening event. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for me to understand what was coming. Mom, we were wondering if, as a gift, you might be able to help cover it. You're such a big part of why we've made it 10 years. It would mean so much to have you contribute to the celebration. I was quiet for a moment. I asked if they had looked at other venues, smaller ones. Something more in their budget. Daniel said Melissa had her heart set on this place. He said it gently. He knew how to say things gently. I told him I would think about it. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and Frank's old yellow notepad, and I wrote down every number I could remember. The 2,000s, the 5,000s, the 23,000 for their kitchen renovation, the 14,000 for Melissa's car, the 8,000 for private kindergarten for Chloe. When I added it all up, The total was somewhere around 150,000, and I knew I was probably forgetting some. I stared at the number for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and transferred $28,000 to Daniel's account. I told myself it was a gift. I told myself I was lucky to be able to give it. I flew to Charlotte in June, economy, because that was what made sense. Daniel had told me to come in the day before the party, so we could spend some time together. When I arrived, he and Melissa were at the venue finalizing details. Their neighbor watched the kids. I let myself into their house with the spare key and made dinner, which no one came home in time to eat. The morning of the celebration, Melissa was in the master bedroom with her sister and two friends, getting hair and makeup done. A professional team had been brought in. The house smelled like hairspray and champagne. Chloe ran through the hallway in her flower girl dress and stopped when she saw me. "Hi, Grandma," she said, and then kept running, called back by someone in the other room. Daniel found me in the kitchen around 11. He was already dressed, handsome in a gray suit. He kissed my cheek and said I looked nice. Then he said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the seating." I set down my coffee. He explained that the venue had a head table at the front of the barn, raised on a small platform, where he and Melissa and their wedding party would sit. The wedding party was 8 people: Melissa's sister, her 3 college friends, Daniel's best friend from college, and 3 of their Charlotte couple friends. Then there were round tables throughout the main space for family and other guests. I assumed I would be at a table near the front. I was his mother. "Mom," he said, "the thing is, Melissa's parents are at table 1, right next to the head table, and her aunts and cousins are at table 2. And then our Charlotte friends are at 3 and 4 because they helped plan everything. I've put you at table 9, back near the bar. The Hendersons are there, and a few people from my office. You'll have a great time with them. They're really fun people. Table 9, back near the bar, with his colleagues." I looked at my son. I had given this man $28,000 so that he and his wife could stand in a converted barn and recite vows in front of 100 guests, and he had seated me at table 9, near the bar, with people from his office. "I see," I said. He was already moving toward the sound of Melissa calling his name from upstairs. "It's just logistics, Mom. You know how these things are. You understand." I nodded. "I understand," I said. He didn't hear me. He was already halfway up the stairs. I stood alone in that kitchen for a long moment. Then something very quiet settled over me. Not quite anger. Not quite grief. Something colder than both. I picked up my purse, found a chair in the living room, and sat down. I thought about the yellow notepad. I thought about the number I had written and then tried to forget. The reception that night was beautiful. The barn was strung with warm lights. The flowers were white and green and everywhere. The caterer served beef tenderloin and passed hors d'oeuvres, and there was a dessert table that must have cost $1,000 on its own. I sat at table 9. The Hendersons were pleasant enough. A man named Gary from Daniel's office told me a long story about a golf trip he had taken in Myrtle Beach. At the head table, raised on the platform at the front of the room, Daniel and Melissa laughed and touched foreheads and fed each other bites of cake. Melissa's mother dabbed her eyes. Her father gave a toast that made everyone clap. No one mentioned me. When Daniel took the microphone to thank people, he thanked Melissa's parents for their love and support. He thanked his best friend for standing by him. He thanked the venue staff. He did not say my name. I flew home the next morning. On the plane, somewhere over Tennessee, I opened the Notes app on my phone and started typing. Every transfer I could remember, every date, every amount, every reason Daniel had given me. I typed for an hour. When I landed in Columbus, I had a list and I had a decision. That Monday, I called my bank. I asked the woman on the phone to send me a complete transaction history for the last 4 years. She said it would arrive by email within 24 hours. Then I asked her about changing the beneficiary on my accounts. She transferred me to someone in their estate services department. I made an appointment for Thursday. The statement arrived Tuesday morning. I sat at the kitchen table with my reading glasses and a red pen, and I went through every page. The final number, the real number, was $162,400. I had given my son $162,000 in 3 years. He had repaid zero. I called my friend Dorothy, who had been my closest friend since we both started teaching in the Columbus School District back in 1987. Dorothy had retired 2 years before me, after her husband's heart attack, and she was sharp and unsentimental in the way that only a woman who has survived genuine hardship can be. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Dorothy. When I finished, she said, "Ruth Ann, what do you need right now?" I said, "I need someone to come with me to meet with an estate attorney on Thursday." She said, "I'll be there at 8:30. Don't eat breakfast alone." The attorney's name was Patricia Walsh. She was in her mid-50s, with reading glasses on a chain and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of the good librarians, the ones who helped you find what you actually needed instead of what you thought you were looking for. She looked through my transaction history without comment. When she reached the final page, she set it down and folded her hands. She asked me one question. "What do you want to protect?" I said, "Everything that's left. The house, the investments, the retirement accounts. I want it structured so that it can't be accessed or influenced by anyone else." She asked if I had a current will. I told her Daniel was the primary beneficiary. She nodded slowly and said, "Let's start there." Over the next 90 minutes, we talked through a revocable living trust, a restructured will that replaced Daniel's inheritance, or the Codeploe and Ryan funds, they could access only at 25, and a medical power of attorney that named Dorothy instead of Daniel. Patricia explained every document. She did not rush me. At the end, she said, "Mrs. Calloway, once these changes are recorded, your son will likely find out within a few weeks. Property transfers trigger notifications if he is named anywhere. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Table 9. I thought about the toast where my name was not spoken. I said, "Yes." The trust was filed on a Friday. By the following Wednesday, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. "Mom." Daniel's voice was tight in a way I had not heard since he was 17 and had wrecked the car. "Mom, I'm getting notifications from accounts with your name on them. The joint savings account, it shows activity. What's going on? Are you all right?" "I'm perfectly fine," I said. "Good morning, Daniel. What did you do?" His voice rose slightly. "Why are you restructuring your accounts without telling me? I'm your emergency contact. I'm supposed to know about these things." "You are my emergency contact for medical situations," I said, "not for financial decisions." There was a pause. "Mom, this isn't like you. Is something wrong? Did someone get to you? Is this about the wedding?" I said, "Yes, it is about the wedding." Silence. I continued, calmly, the way I had practiced with Dorothy the night before. "Daniel, in 4 years I have transferred $162,000 to your account. You have told me every single time that you would pay it back. I have the emails. I have the texts. Not $1 has been returned. And at an event I paid for in its entirety, I was seated at table 9 with your colleagues, while your wife's family sat at the front of the room, and you gave a toast without saying my name." His voice shifted. "Mom, the seating was Melissa's plan. I didn't even really look at it. Wasn't meant to be. It wasn't about disrespect. And the money, that wasn't loans, that was family support. You offered," I asked. "And you accepted. Every single time. And you promised repayment. Quiet. Every single time. Do you remember the Henderson deal?" He went quiet. I said, I need you to understand that what I've done is not punishing you. I am protecting myself. There is a difference. His voice dropped, and something changed in it. It became careful, measured. Mom, I think you need to talk to someone, a professional, because this suspicion of your own family, this isn't the mom I know. I'm worried about you. Melissa's worried. We've both noticed you haven't seemed like yourself since the wedding. I noticed that he said since the wedding, instead of after the wedding. I filed it away. I said, I seem exactly like myself. I said goodbye and ended the call. Dorothy was at my kitchen table when I hung up. She looked at me over her coffee cup. She said, That was fast. How do you feel? I said, I feel like I should have done it 3 years ago. 3 days later, Melissa called. Her voice was warm in a practiced way. She said she wanted to clear the air, that Daniel had been so stressed about work, that they both adored me, that the seating at the vow renewal had been a mistake, purely logistical, and she was so sorry it had hurt my feelings. She said the word feelings as though what I had was a sunburn and not a compound fracture. I let her talk. When she finished, I said, Melissa, I want to ask you something. When Daniel calls me for money, is that a joint decision between the two of you? Or is that something he does on his own? A pause. Then, we make all our decisions together. I see, I said. Then you have been aware of every transfer, every promise to repay, every request. She said, Ruth Ann, family finances are complicated. That's not the same as... I said, thank you for calling. And I hung up. Patricia called me that afternoon. She had an update. The property transfer to the trust had completed. And there was one more step. She wanted me to meet with a colleague of hers, a woman named Dr. Linda Green, a geriatric psychologist who sometimes worked with her estate clients, to provide documented cognitive assessments. Patricia said, I want you to have one on file. Given the direction this seems to be heading, I would like it ready. I asked what direction she meant. She said, In my experience, when adult children lose financial access and start using phrases like, not herself, and worried about her judgment, the next step is usually a formal challenge. I want you to be ahead of it. I said yes without hesitation. Dr. Green saw me that Friday. The evaluation took 3 hours and covered memory, reasoning, language processing, decision-making capacity, and emotional regulation. At the end, she pulled off her glasses and said, You are completely sharp. There is not a single area of concern. Frankly, your reasoning through this entire situation shows more strategic clarity than most people half your age. I thanked her. I drove home and made a pot of soup. I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. I recognized it eventually. It was dignity. Daniel and Melissa came on a Sunday. 2 weeks later, I saw Melissa's white SUV pull up from the front window. I called Dorothy, who was 20 minutes away, and she said she was already in the car. Daniel knocked. I let him in. Melissa followed. And behind her, hesitantly, Chloe and Ryan. Chloe was holding a small potted plant with a yellow ribbon. She held it out to me. Daddy said you like plants, Grandma. I kissed her forehead and took it. It's beautiful, sweet girl. Melissa guided the children to the couch. Daniel sat across from me, his elbows on his knees, and gave me the look he had been giving me since he was 7 years old, and had broken something and needed me not to be angry. Mom, we came because we miss you. And we're concerned. I said, I know you're concerned. Tell me what you're concerned about. He said, You've made major financial changes without talking to us. You've cut us off without any warning. That's not like you. And, honestly, after Dad died, we've all been worried that the grief might be affecting your judgment in ways you're not able to see. Dorothy knocked and opened the door. She had a key. She said, "Hello, everyone," and sat in the armchair by the window. Daniel looked at her. "Who is this?" "Dorothy Coleman. Old friend. Don't mind me." Melissa leaned forward. "Ruth Ann, we're not here to fight. We want to help. What you've done with the accounts, we understand you're upset about the wedding, we really do. And we are so sorry about that, but these are big decisions. Decisions that affect all of us. Don't you think family should be involved?" I said. "I did involve family. I made the decisions myself." "I am the family," Daniel said. "Mom," I said. "Daniel, when is my birthday?" He opened his mouth and stopped. He looked at the ceiling briefly, and Jenny had had since childhood. "It's in September," I said. "The 14th. In the last 4 years, you have called me on my birthday twice. Both times, you asked for money before we hung up. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I need you to understand what the relationship has become." Melissa's expression went through several changes quickly. She settled on injured. I said, "I would also like to point out that you are sitting in this living room, on this furniture, in a house with a paid-off mortgage, and your children are at that school, and in those extracurriculars, at least in part because of the money I transferred to you, and at your celebration, the one I paid for entirely. I sat in the back of the room with people from your office." Daniel stood up. He was pale. "Mom, I didn't know you were that upset about the seating," I said. "Then you didn't ask. That is also part of the problem." He sat back down. Melissa touched his arm. "Their private signal." Daniel cleared his throat and said, "We spoke with an attorney about a competency evaluation. We're not trying to go down that road, Mom. We don't want that. But we need you to understand how serious we are about this. About wanting to protect you." Dorothy spoke from the armchair, pleasantly. "What's your attorney's name?" Daniel frowned. "Why?" Dorothy said. "Because I practiced family law in Franklin County for 22 years, and I want to make sure whoever you've spoken with has explained to you what a competency petition actually requires, and what the standard of evidence is in Ohio. Because if they haven't, you may be walking into something quite embarrassing." Melissa's lips pressed together. "This has nothing to do with you," Dorothy said. "You made it my business when you started talking about my friend's mental fitness." I said, "Daniel, I have a formal cognitive evaluation completed 5 days ago by a licensed geriatric psychologist. I have 4 years of bank records. I have every email and text message in which you promised to repay money you never returned. And I have Patricia Walsh, who drafted my estate documents, and will testify that I participated in every decision with complete understanding and clarity. If you file a petition, you will lose, and the records will become public." The room was very quiet. Ryan climbed off the couch and came to stand next to me. He put his small hand on my knee. "Grandma, are you sad?" I covered his hand with mine. "No, sweetheart. I'm okay." Melissa collected both children and sent them to the backyard. When she came back in, the warmth was gone from her voice. She said, "You're willing to destroy this family over money." I said, "You already changed this family. Over money. I'm the one trying to protect what's left of it." Daniel said, "If you won't reverse the account changes, we won't bring the kids to Columbus anymore. I want you to understand what you're choosing." I said, "Then I'll grieve that, but I won't be managed." They left. Chloe waved at me from the backseat window. I waved back and stood on the porch until the car turned the corner. Then I went inside and sat at my kitchen table and cried for 20 minutes, which was what I needed to do. Dorothy made tea. She did not tell me I had done the right thing, because she knew I already knew that. They did not file the petition. I believe Dorothy's presence changed their calculation. What they did instead was go quiet. No calls for 3 weeks. No texts. I did not reach out either. I used the silence to do things I had been putting off for years. I got the gutters cleaned. I started a walking group with 2 women from my church. I signed up for a memoir writing class at the library, which made me laugh given that I had spent 30 years in libraries and had somehow never taken a class in one. In the 5th week, Daniel called. His voice was different, flatter. He said Melissa had taken a part-time job. He said they were working with a financial counselor. He said he was sorry about the toast. He said it quietly, without explanation or justification. Just, I'm sorry. I should have said your name. I said, I know you are. He asked if we could have a phone call sometime. Not about money, not about the accounts, just to talk. I said yes. It wasn't forgiveness. It was an opening, and it was a small one, but it was real. I could tell the difference. I had learned finally to tell the difference. Chloe called me from Melissa's phone a week later. She had made something at school, a collage about someone she admired, and she had made it about me. She told me she had written that I was a librarian who loved books and her grandpa and knew the name of every plant in her yard. She said her teacher had told her it was lovely. I told her it was the best thing anyone had ever made for me. I meant it. The months that followed were quiet in a way I had forgotten was possible. I painted the guest bedroom, a color called morning fog. I started cooking again, really cooking, not just heating things, and I began inviting the women from my walking group over on Friday evenings. Dorothy came most weeks. We played cards and argued about books and laughed loudly enough that the dog next door barked. I booked a trip to Savannah in the fall, just me, 4 nights in a small inn near the historic district. I walked those streets alone and ate shrimp and grits and sat on a bench by the waterfront and thought about Frank and felt, unexpectedly, grateful. Grateful that he had taught me to be careful with money. Grateful that I had enough left to protect. Grateful that I had finally stopped being so afraid of losing love that I had let people take everything else. I learned something in the last year that I wish someone had told me 40 years ago. Generosity is a beautiful thing. But generosity without honesty isn't giving. It's shrinking. When you keep saying yes because you're afraid of what no might cost you, you don't save the relationship. You just buy time before it collapses anyway, and you collapse along with it. My house is mine. My money is mine. My grandchildren are finding their way back to me on their own terms, slowly, and that is something I will not rush. Daniel and I talk on the phone every Sunday. We talk about small things. It is a beginning. Was I too harsh? Maybe someone watching thinks so, but I have stood in the back of a room that I paid for, watching my son raise a glass for everyone but me, and I made a decision that day about what I was willing to accept. I decided I was worth more than that. I think you are too. So I will ask you what I always ask. What would you have done? Would you have kept writing the checks to keep the peace? Or would you have picked up the phone and called the bank? If this story reached you today, if it touched something you've been carrying quietly, please share it. Someone in your life may need to hear that it is not too late, that the line can still be drawn, that you are allowed to protect yourself. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm Hannah, and I'll be here next time. Take good care of yourself. You deserve that much.